everybody. Good afternoon to our session, International HR Talks. Today, Thursday, 16th of June. I can see Jose Marti from Spain, Didac Gonzalez. I can see David Reyero. Hi, David. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. Nice to see you, Jose. Laura, nice to see you too, Didac.
Hey, Silvia, how are you?
Hi. Hi, everybody. Hi, Thomas. Nice to see you again. I love being their CEO people too, HR and CEO, because it goes very close together now. Okay, I'm going to explain to you, meanwhile people are connecting, I'm going to explain to you what is the International HR Talks. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, hi, Sylvia.
International HR Talks is a format every 2 weeks, Thursdays from 3 to 4 p.m., where we present global people, very influencing people, talking about, inspiring people, talking about what is happening now and how is it influencing the future. Yeah? Everything related to people. Yes. We had 2 weeks ago, we had Gary from Harvard University who showed us that the world is changing, the ways of working are changing. And it was curious to find that Harvard is doing exactly the same like Singapore when we had Fred 10, or what's happening in UK, in France, in Germany, and in Spain. So we are in a global happening that the shift from the companies has gone to the shift and to the power to the candidates. Yeah, the candidates, the employees decide now what's going on, and that's why we have to think in employee and candidate centricity, because everything is going around them. So you can't work anymore without taking into account your employees, or in my case, our candidates. They decide the future of and shape the future of work. Yeah. Okay. I would like, meanwhile, people are connecting. We had 80. I hope that more are coming. We are entering a little bit of summer season. And Pedro, you know, we are recording your speech. That means a lot of more people will see it. Yes. Okay, Pedro, we knew each other 3.5 years ago when you were a participant, a speaker, a keynote speaker at the 5th International HR Conference. You are one of the most innovative guys I know over the last 20 years, I think. Pedro is the CEO and founder of Opinno, which is one of the most global innovative consultancies. And he's just operating in 20 countries and now opening new fields. And sure, we are going to open together now the Middle East field. Yeah, he's opening offices. We already opened them. And I meet your team next week there, by the way, Pedro. Okay, and Pedro is the publisher for the MIT Review journal and the publisher for the Harvard Business Review in Spanish. And he has a lot of more titles, but I would like to introduce himself, Pedro, to talk about what he's doing in innovative things and how does he see the future and the future of innovation and the future of people. Thank you, Pedro, for being here again.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and good afternoon, everybody. Silvia, how much time do you want me to speak?
Yeah, you can speak more or less half an hour, if it's okay, and then we have a very, I hope, a very intensive Q&A session.
Okay, if it gets too boring or too technical, just let me know, and we can maybe focus on something that's more interesting to you guys. Okay, so I prepared some slides to guide the discussion and also to guide the conversation later. Let me try to share my screen. Right. Can you see on full screen?
Yeah, now we can see it. Thank you, Pedro. Yes.
Perfect. So I'll skip the presentation or the introduction. I just want to let you know I'm the founder of Opinno. Opinno is an innovation consultancy. We've been working for 13 years, around 250 consultants mostly in Europe, Southern Europe, Latin America, and now Middle East and the US. I also published the MIT magazine since 2008, and I'm an innovation fellow at Eisenhower Fellowships and a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. I've always started my conversations with HR people discussing why it's important to understand that humans are not a stable species. Equilibrium doesn't exist in the human world. And anthropologists say that this is because of three reasons. First, humans are different from any other animal because we have a huge hunger for discovery. We are very curious. We are the only type of animal that when everything's fine, things are right, your life is easy, you complicate yourself. You want to look after, you want to climb the hill, you want to explore further, you want to know what's going on, and get constantly uncomfortable to learn new things. So we're very curious by nature. Second, anthropologists say that having the opposed thumbs makes us, excellent engineers. So we are very good at manufacturing things. So curiosity plus dexterity is the birth of technology. Technology is the act of turning ideas into useful things, useful tools. And then the third thing is we are extremely good at coordinating with each other and communicating complicated ideas. So if you combine these three things, like we build new knowledge, we turn it into tools, we share the knowledge with everybody else, and then we use that knowledge and those tools to build new knowledge. This is a positive, divergent cycle. So we are exponential by nature. So any politician, any economist, any technologists that project a stable future are by nature wrong. So Sylvia has seen me show this graph a lot of times, and this is actually a representation of our own instability. It depicts all the most important events that have changed dramatically how we live and how we organize ourselves in the planet. And the important thing about this graph is that it's on an algorithmic scale. So as we go to the right, which is the present, events are happening closer and closer to each other. So what's really relevant from these times that we're living today is that the rate of disruption, the time spent between two events is decreasing dramatically to rates that are below, for example, the life expectancy of humans. So for example, we are the first generation ever in history that's going to experiment at least one of these events in our lifetime. This didn't happen 80 years ago. This is a great excuse not to follow what's written on textbooks, because the world hasn't been experimented, hasn't been working the way it works now, ever. And this hasn't stopped. So it's not only one event like these that we're going to experience in our lives, it's going to be 10 or 100. And as I'm explaining now, these really disruptive events are not only happening more frequently, they're happening so frequently right now, they are starting to be simultaneous. And not only simultaneous, but they're also interfering with each other. Probably the most three important technologies that are happening right now are artificial intelligence, which is probably the most promising on a very early stage, the Internet of Things, and 5G communications and what's coming after 5G. And the interference of these is huge because in order for artificial intelligence to work, you need data. And data has been, handwritten by humans until now. But now we're putting sensors and we're putting communication ability in those sensors, through IoT and through 5G. So we're going to generate huge amounts of data automatically. So most of the internet traffic is going to be generated by machines, and most of the data is going to be generated by sensors. And that data needs to travel to our artificial intelligence computation centers. And 5G is going to be a key for that. So each of these three technologies deserves to be on the graph I showed before, but the combination of the three is much more than the sum. It's probably exponentially greater. So these three things are potentially the largest technology disruption that we've ever experienced in history. I always recommend this article. It's called "The Strategy in the Age of Superabundant Capital." And it's a very interesting view, a financial view of how, not only innovation is increasing in speed historically, but something happened in 2008 that made innovation increase in speed even much more. And it speaks about how after the 2008 crisis, remember that in 2007, 2008, there are two main events that happen. In 2007, Apple launches the iPhone, which is the main vector of globalization of the internet worldwide, smartphones. And 2008, the financial crisis happens, and all central banks across the world flood the system with liquidity. So money, funding, which used to be scarce and expensive, becomes abundant and cheap. And the graph that you need to really understand, and I really encourage you to read this article, is the one on the right. In dark green, you see the increase in value of a company that grows their margins 1% by decreasing the costs. So by means of efficiency. And in light green, you see the increase of valuation of a company that increases 1% their margin by growth, by innovation, by diversification. On the horizontal axis is the cost of money. So the world before 2008 is on the right. And in before 2008, money was scarce, was a very valuable raw material. So when something is scarce and valuable, it's important to manage it carefully. So the world before 2008 was a world of efficiency, of making machines work like Swiss watches. So you see that you would grow the value of a company by making it more efficient. But if you don't invest in efficiency, the market doesn't want you to grow your company, in a messy way. They want you to be efficient. This is why if you look at MBA programs, if you look at the profiles of leaders, of baby boomers, it's all about, Six Sigma, total quality, efficiency, post-merger integration, like making companies run smoothly and efficient, excellence, all these factors that are that were taught in business schools. What's new is what comes on the left, sorry. You see that as we approach cheaper and cheaper capital, there's a spike here in light green to up to 27%. It means when capital becomes very, very cheap and very accessible, it's okay to make the company more efficient, but what really counts is to capture market share, to disrupt. And this is where a lot of money leaves the traditional market and it starts funding, billions of dollars of funding in software companies. This is where the software unicorns start happening. So there are two or several ideas to take out or take away as an HR executive here. The first is, if you look at the profiles of the leaders of your company, are they all leaders of this 6%? Are they efficiency oriented leaders, or are they growth leaders? Are they creative? Are they digital? Are they disruptive? Are they looking to expand? Are they optimistic? Or are they conservative? Are they efficiency and quality oriented? So the second idea is, it's not okay to, you would say, I could grow 6% and that's fine. But that's not enough, because if your competitor is growing by 27%, he's going to displace you and you're going to become irrelevant as a company, which has happened to many, many companies, whether you look at hotels or taxis or retail stores and many other sectors. So another idea for HR people, in order to reach the highest leadership roles in companies, you need to age, you need to be old, because you need to accumulate experience. But if you need to accumulate a lot of experience, it means that you're not fresh blood. You probably are not digital by nature. And it's important to know that we need diversity in profiles, in origins, but also in ages, in the top levels of leadership in companies. And I'm not talking only about the senior executives, but also boards of advisors, boards of directors inside companies. And I know they're, especially in Spain, they're pretty endogamic. It's always the same people. and they're all over 65, which is no good for this scenario. So I was speaking about 3 technologies, but now we're starting to see also external effects that are getting more and more relevant in the equation. First of all is climate change. Sustainability is becoming a main concern for everybody. And either it's because of our own ethics or because governments and regulations are going to make us take it into account, or clients and service providers. So value chains are going to turn into towards sustainability, whether we like it or not. Second is there's too many people around in the world, and disruptions in health are going to probably happen more and more often as we push nature to the corner, and we're closer and closer to each other, and we travel more. And the third, and I think the war in Ukraine is a perfect example. There's a new world order happening. There's a new Cold War, new version of the Cold War. The new superpowers, the United States, China, India, that I will speak about in a few minutes, or Europe. Nobody wants to miss the opportunity of leading in these 3 technologies. Everybody wants to be setting up the standards for how a 5G is going to work. And this is you see the Huawei quest and battle all over the world. Nobody wants to, everybody wants to build the right alliances to be able to increase the opportunities to trade with the main economies. And everybody's approaching this a different way, but there's a more and more tension around the world. And there's a restructuring process going on who's going to play on whose team from now on. I was speaking about different models. For me, these are the 4 main innovation models that are going to define the 21st century. We're very used to the first one. The US has probably been the world leader in technology, at least in high technology in the last century. And it was all about private initiative with speed and private funding. Famous phrase, Mark Zuckerberg, move fast, break things, ask for forgiveness and not for permission, was very typical of these ages. We have a European side that is a little more discreet. I think Europeans have a real danger of being left out of this conversation of the new technology standards. But I really think we have an edge. We have an opportunity. Europe has built the most aggressive and strict rules for data protection and privacy protection in the world. And this seemed like a hurdle for innovation. Everybody who's an entrepreneur here has complained in the past. Europe is making it very difficult for us to lead because if we don't have data, we cannot build powerful businesses, and we're going to be displaced by competitors in China or the US. But you probably agree with me that if it's not a social media engine, but it's a car that's driving you, or it's a system that's assessing your health and it's proposing a diagnosis and a treatment, or if it's a machine that's training your kids and educating your kids, you want good ethics embedded in that machine. And I think this is where Europe needs to play a role, like laying the foundations on what we think are the right rules for these new technologies to work, how privacy, how data transfers, how data monetization, how artificial intelligence is going to grow on good values, or what we consider in Europe, good values and good ethics and good principles. Third model, China, which is all about scale and state control, which is a very different model. You're able to train very good artificial intelligence machines if you're the state and you control all the flows of data. Whoever's been in China over the last few years know that if you go to Tianjin or Beijing or to Shanghai, there's a camera every 50 meters. If you walk on the street, there are sensors on every single traffic light. They know the plate and license plate number of every car that drives through every single traffic light. So if you bet on who's going to build a consistent self-driving algorithm for cars, you would say it's China, probably, because of matters of size. I would argue that if you add the ethics to it, Europe has a strong position to hold. And I really would like you guys to pay attention to this fourth quarter, which is India. India has been very discreet for the moment. They have, they've gone through a demonetization process which was painful, but at the same time really, really good for them. Where a country that made probably like 8,500 transactions with cash money, completely, took away all the cash and replaced it with 90% digital currencies and digital transactions in less than a year. So this really helped build a layer of digital technologies for the whole country, which is unifying for them and allowing also a lot of new technologies to be born. So this picture underneath, called India Stack, is probably one of the most relevant government approach to digitization that I've seen in the last couple of years. Huge set of open source technologies that India is building for the citizens and for companies to operate and work with each other. When you have that and you have 1.6 billion people using them daily, you have something really, really strong to bring to the rest of the world. A couple of articles I want you guys to look at, which are really important on how to pace the rhythm of transformation or disruption inside a company. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Beautiful article from Harvard Business Review called Right Technology, Wrong Time. So sometimes, an old technology gets substituted by a new technology, and you would think that the transition would be clean. One ends, the second one begins. This is called creative destruction. But usually the transformation or the trip from one technology to the next is not clean. It's messier. And it happens because the older technology lasts longer than we thought, or the new technology takes longer to take place. And then there are different ways to go from the old technology to the new technology. Each of them has different challenges. I would say for large companies, the incumbents, the guys who are there before the disruption, the one that's more dangerous is number C, or letter C. And this quadrant is called the illusion of resilience. And it usually happens when a technology, a new technology takes a little longer to reach us than we thought. And a perfect example of this are, you have here illusion of resilience, GPS navigators. So you probably remember, you're old enough to remember when there were no GPSs. And then for a long time, there were GPSs in airplanes and boats. And they would say, at some point you won't need a map anymore because there will be a GPS in your pocket. And so we thought that the typical transition would be to purchase a GPS, and everybody will have a GPS that was very useful, but you will have to buy it. And then boom, in one generation of cell phones, everybody, like every single cell phone had it, So it took a little longer, but the transition was absolutely spontaneous. And this is very dangerous because usually an incumbent, when they see the technology coming, but they see that it's really not happening, they lower the guard and they disregard it, and they don't pay attention. And this is what makes it really, really dangerous for ongoing businesses. A blockchain case, I'm not going to spend time on this, but this is another article called The Truth About Blockchain. And it discusses that you have also to be very careful as leaders in your companies when they talk about a new technology, when you hear about blockchain is coming or artificial intelligence is coming, because it's not only the technology, but it's the use of the technology, what functionality you want to use it for, and what environment you're going to use it in. The more complex the functionality and the more complex the environment, the slower this is going to take place. And also the more impactful the use of this technology is going to be. So my recommendation, and the recommendation of this article, is when you, as a company, you want to start mingling or interacting with a new technology, you have to choose a very simple application of the technology and a very small environment, right? There are two examples here. You see in white, the case of blockchain, and in black, the case of the internet. After you do that, the logical step is to go to a more complicated use of the technology, but it's still in a very restricted, small environment. And then you can go to the more complex environments outside, letting people outside use the technology. Again, for whoever's curious, you can read the whole article, and I really recommend it. Now, I want to bring your attention to something that no one is talking about, or very few people are talking about, at least. We've been quite distracted by COVID over the last couple of years. But if you look at these charts that are being published now, you can see that the number of software unicorns, the number of companies worth more than $1 billion, startup companies, has been multiplying by 5 every year over the last couple of years. So the universe of technologies that we're going to see in the near future is completely different. And the architecture of companies inside the technology architecture is going to be completely different. There are several reasons why this is happening. First is there are internet connected devices everywhere. Second, connectivity is very fast. So it allows us for online collaboration like the one we're having right now with no issues, or complicated computation on the cloud. There are new platforms, new technologies that have been developed that use each other technologies. And the last one is society is ready. And I think COVID has played a huge role here. Everybody's used to working remotely, to using tools on the cloud, to interacting with their phone and a desktop computer at the same time, to wearing a wearable. So society is ready, technology is ready, connectivity is fast, and everybody has connected devices. So again, very roughly, but I'm going to discuss or present 3 stages of evolution of the cloud. The first one in the 2000s, when the cloud started getting relevant, you would have the first generation of cloud providers, of cloud competitors, that would use the usual suspects, the software providers that would sell to businesses before the cloud, the Microsofts, Oracles, SAPs. And I call them monopolists because they would say, this company runs on SAP, because everything in the company would be run by SAP, or this company runs on Microsoft or on Oracle, right? And then around the 2010s, 2005 to 2015, you start seeing vertical clouds. So instead of catching everything, they say, I'm going to specialize in something concrete. Salesforce, I'm going to do sales really well. Workday, I'm going to do HR. And now they're doing finance as well. AWS, I'm going to do storage, right? Or servers. And they started doing something vertical. As a company, this starts creating some complexity, because it's like you would have a phone, and now you have a phone with different apps, and those apps need to talk to each other. So as a software architect or as a CTO inside a company, you start having to mingle or to work with softwares on the cloud that do one thing and they need to talk to each other. Now we have a different age. I told you that we have a 5 times increase per year in the number of unicorns. So we're having a lot of these new technologies coming up. You probably know some of them, but some of these names may actually be new for some of you guys. But these are going to be the Salesforce of 2 or 3 years from now, right? These 3 companies have records of being the fastest growing software companies in history so far. You probably know the Slack also grew very fast. Personio and HR system you probably know about already. So we're going to see an even more fragmented ecosystem of software inside companies, and more utilities or more applications running on the cloud for our employees. So now a new idea. So we talked about an age, a phase after 2008 where innovation explodes, digital explodes, the startup ecosystem leads, and all corporations kind of are left behind. I really encourage you to read this presentation sent by Sequoia, which is the most successful venture capital firm in the world, to all their portfolio companies, calling Adapting to Endure. Basically saying, the end of the first quarter or the second quarter of 2022 is going to be a turning point. There's going to be less liquidity. The interest rates are going to increase for the first time in 20, 30 years, right? Yesterday, the Fed increased interest rates by 0.75. the highest increase in 28 years. And this is going to change things. So basically this presentation is telling them, fasten your seatbelts because there's going to be less money available. You need to adapt to be able to survive with less cash. You need to look at profitability. You need to reduce your costs because there's a tough scenario coming. And I would say this is an opportunity for incumbents, and this is an opportunity for large companies. There are lots of companies that are going to be in trouble, especially those that have been fueled by cheap cash in the last few years. So the Airbnbs, the delivery heroes, Gorillas, I see Sylvia's in Germany, so Gorillas, Coinbase, many of these new disruptive companies, fast-growing companies, very aggressive, we're actually operating on negative margins. And if you take the cash out, if you take the influx of cash out, they're going to be laying off people and they're going to be very weak. And if they're publicly traded, they're going to be losing value very fast. So it's an opportunity to drive talent. If you ever wanted to hire people from Amazon or Microsoft or all these fancy startups that have been attracting talent like crazy over the last few years, this is your chance. Like, do it now, right? So for HR people, these are really good news. And also, if you want to make acquisitions as a leader of a company, this is also a very, very good opportunity. So I'm talking to many clients right now who run, very large companies, very successful. They've been market leaders for a long time, and they were really scared about disruptive startups taking their space. And I tell them, this may be an opportunity. This may be the opportunity. You have to catch up with the innovation space you've been waiting for. I'm going to be a little faster now because this gets a little more technical. But for HR people, I think this is really cool. We're coming from organization schemes or structures of baby boomers that look like pyramids, where there were like specialized departments divided in silos, and there was a very hierarchical structure like a pyramid with a maximum leader at the top. You probably have all experimented that, running more agile structures, more diverse teams with more freedom and more, a higher delegation of responsibilities to take on challenges and tasks was a faster way, a more efficient way to adapt to a very volatile market. So most of my clients and most of the companies are already, making this transition from a pyramid to an agile structure. COVID has brought us, remote working, and when we're working remotely and we don't share a uniform, we don't share an office, it really makes the differences between an employee, a contractor, a consultant, a service provider, even a client and a user fuzzy. Yeah. So the interaction with all these kinds of guys is becoming harder and harder to differentiate. Right now, there are many companies working with outside collaborators, and you don't see any difference with the actual staff. And if you go really far away to the internet platforms, and you're an Airbnb member or you're an Instagram user, are you a service provider? You're generating content, or are you a consumer because you're consuming content? So, these barriers are starting to be fuzzy. So look, speaking or thinking about liquid organizations, it says fluid, but it should say liquid. Liquid organizations is an opportunity for you guys. And it requires a completely different set of skills, tools to interact with these people. I really encourage you guys to look at how open source companies and other, organizations that gather followers are working, like political parties or music fans that get together because they are motivated by something, and then they're able to contribute for many different reasons. It's not just for money. And now the most futuristic view is Superminds. And again, we're reaching a time where technology and humans are merging closer and closer together to a point where we're going to start collaborating more and more thoroughly in the next few years. So Tom Malone, the author of Superminds, also leads a research center that we work with a lot called the Collaborative Intelligence Center at MIT. And basically what he states on this book is that it's demonstrated that groups of humans make better decisions when they're working together than individual humans. So collaboration as a group is better than having isolated humans making decisions. He also says that groups of computers make better decisions than computers by themselves. And then he says that groups of humans and computers make better decisions than anyone else. And that the future is about building groups of humans and groups of computers that are deeply interrelated. And this is what he calls superminds. Another trend, this may be a little bit further from your focus, but I've seen a great change in how innovation is structured in the last 15 years. Innovation continues to be better and better packaged. So before 2008, it was all about R&D, building ideas, registering patents, and usually only large organizations and governments could play in the innovation space. After 2008, as we spoke, more capital, more platforms like the iPhone, entrepreneurship and innovation becomes very accessible to individuals and startups, small organizations. So it's the age of venture capital, startups, and a very diverse and rich, fast-moving environment with a lot of private funding, where big businesses kind of lose the track or the speed to the small startup market. And 2018 starts being the age of venture builders, where kind of large organizations are starting to catch up and be able to build startups from within or associate with entrepreneurs on an earlier stage to build companies together. And if you combine this trend that started to happen before COVID with the credit crush and the interest rate increase that's happening now, I think this is another big opportunity for corporations. So corporations, large organizations, when they're thinking about transforming themselves, when they're thinking about innovation, it's no longer about having ideas. It's no longer about putting money in startups. It's no longer about organizing the company differently. It's actually becoming entrepreneurs and really building companies from scratch and using your platform and your distribution channels and your client base as leverages to win in this game. Another interesting idea, I've seen the leadership of innovation change a lot over the last 15 years. Before 2008, when the internet reached everywhere through the iPhone, and startups started popping up everywhere, it was all about ecosystems. So everybody was building an accelerator after 2008, right? Even politicians spoke about entrepreneurship for the first time. So it was a very reputation-led movement. Innovation was held by the chief marketing officer many times. It was all about building a reputation that my company works with startups. I want to change the culture of my company. I want to interact with startups more and more. I want to learn how they organize and how they work and how this talent kind of is attracted to work in a startup and not attracted to work in my company. 2012, this gets more analytical. So companies start saying, I don't need 1,000 startups to try to work with me. I want to do things seriously, and I maybe want to interact with 5 companies, but I really want to do things right and at scale. And I also want to start investing in transforming my organization. So this is when many companies start naming chief digital officers, putting the innovation in digital on their boards of directors, giving it more budget, and investing in transformation. So since 2012, this is when you see the spike in investment in agile transformation, cultural transformation, employee experience, and all these things. And then 2018, I was speaking about this age of making companies entrepreneurs. So launching companies from the corporation. So this new stage has a huge responsibility on the shoulders of CIOs, Chief Information Officers, because I was speaking that the information architecture, technology architecture inside organizations is very fast going to the cloud, and it's becoming multi-cloud, it's becoming very complex. And also right now we have the opportunity to open these architectures to the outside world. So instead of, if I have a startup, instead of talking to the guy running the accelerator, I'm going to talk to the CIO, or I'm going to do it directly through the portal or the SDK or the app developer community that this company has set in place. If we have more time later in the conversation, I can discuss this. This gets a little technical. In order to be able to communicate a company with the outside world, the key word is APIs, and APIs have basically 5 degrees of complexity. But I'm not going to spend time on this, Sylvia, because otherwise I'll use the full hour and it will get too complicated. So I want to end with this idea of, we've gone from a world where if I was an entrepreneur and I wanted to work with a large corporation, I would join the accelerator program. This is the first stage that I mentioned, ecosystem-driven innovation, to a world where if I had a company and I needed to interact with a corporation, I would like to be invested by their fund or talk to the chief digital officer. It would be a much more serious conversation, but it was still manual. And then this third stage is about preparing the company to interact digitally, directly with the startup community, with the outside world. And in order to do that, you need to prepare your company as a platform. These 2 books, for me, are super important for you guys. Everybody should read them, especially the one on the left. It explains that a platform is much more than a technology. A platform is a mindset. So thinking about your company as a platform is probably going to be the most important thing to make it successful in the next, in the future, in the near future. And working as a platform means that it's no longer you who decides, what you sell or how it works, or even talk to customers or do the full cycle of sales. You're a mediator, you're a facilitator of interactions, and you want successful, and value generating interactions to happen in your platform. And your platform that may be designed for a specific purpose. For example, if you're a bank, for financial transactions turns into an operating system. A bank that's really well made technology-wise can become an operating system. A financial transaction can happen in any kind of business, and you could embed your technology to drive financial transactions in hotels or in entertainment or in food purchases or in transportation, anywhere. So it's basically a different way to think, and it drives many conclusions or many spillovers in what kind of people you need, how you're organized, what you sell, your channels, how you work, everything, right? So this platform mindset is about, okay, saying I've brought my business to this level. I have these resources, these assets, these clients, these products. How can I leverage all those to build a successful community where clients and providers, where users and consumers can connect and drive value or generate value for us? This is again too technical, so I won't get into much more detail. But I want to tell you one example, which is my own. I run an innovation company, a consultancy. The consultancy business is very old, and I would say it's also very old-fashioned because consultants used to look like each other, all wear the same suit with a tie to make you look older because you're usually too young for your job and you need to sound respectable. But, it was very, very old-fashioned, pyramid-driven. Only, consultants that were on full-time payroll could work for Accenture or KPMG or BCG. But now we're facing different challenges. For example, companies are getting more technical and more savvy. So it's not anymore about building PowerPoint slides. Maybe a couple of years ago, they wanted to learn about big data on a PowerPoint, but now they want to implement it. What happens is that new talent that implements these new skills or has these new skills doesn't want to work for Accenture or for KPMG or BCG. They work by the project, and they work wherever they want, and they work on their terms. And what's even more important, if you want to remain fresh in a craft like blockchain or cybersecurity, you need a lot of time to study, to publish, to speak in public, and to read. So if you hire a full-time expert on blockchain, you're destroying value for him and for you. So how do you cope with this? We need to interact with this gig economy, people that work by the project with a completely different culture, that work from any country, and they want to work on their swimsuit in Bali. How do you combine that with the corporation world, where if you need to work with a corporation, you need to have a balance sheet, you need to have your insurance policies, you need to have your ISO certifications, you need to be a registered service provider in their purchasing platform, you need to have a P&L, you need to have full-time employees or project managers that can report to the client. I personally don't think that there's a more customer-driven business than consulting. Yeah, all of you guys who work in consulting, even Sylvia in the recruiting world, when you work with a client, he has your cell phone and he will call you in the weekend and he will call you at midnight because, the service level or the service, the user experience in consulting has very high standards. So how do you combine that with this crazy world that we're facing with a gig economy? And our response at Opinno comes with the word hybrid, which I think is going to be the most important word in the next few years. Work is not going to remote or in the office, it's going to be hybrid. Talent is not going to be on payroll or a freelance, it's going to be hybrid. So our take to hybrid consulting is that companies still want the experience of working with a consultancy where the consultant is a full-time employee, where the company that works with them is a registered service provider, has the insurance policies, has the ISO certifications, is compliance, compliant with the data protection policies, with sustainability, with gender, with diversity, with everything else, that is able to manage or run confidential projects and multi-person projects, which is something a freelance cannot do. So you provide that, and you provide that by the project manager. The project manager is the guy who sits in front of the client, that in our case is always a full-time employee at Opinno. But then on the execution, we bring two things from the economy, the gig economy. First is these set of experts that are experts in very concrete areas, cybersecurity, IoT, artificial intelligence, ethnography, psychology, whatever you need, design. And then we also are engaging with something that I found to be one of the most valuable gems I found as an entrepreneur, which is senior executives. I've seen that many senior executives, and I mean people usually over 50, below 65, who by different means have left the corporation and they're not getting back to a corporate job anymore. And they're too expensive for me to hire. And they don't want to work full-time for anybody else anymore. They usually teach, they write, they take care of the grandchildren, they invest in a few startups, and they serve in boards of directors or boards of advisors. We are building advisory boards with them. So we're now, when we submit an offer to a project, we build an ad hoc advisory board with experts that are really well tailored to this project. So, this is the concrete example of a consultancy company, but I really think the world is going this way. So we're going to work together in project environments, and we're going to mix senior people with young people, broad scopes from senior people with vertical, concrete, skill-oriented scopes. And we are going to keep the project manager role, on the traditional scheme to provide, the comfort and the experience and the compliance that the corporate world still needs. So this is my take on the hybrid world, and I think I'm going to stop here. And if you guys want, we can discuss.
Thank you so much, Pedro. It's always a pleasure and an honor to listen to you because so many ideas come to my head right now. And what you are telling, Pedro, I learned it at Singularity University in 2017 when they told us that we won't have fixed people in the companies anymore. The shift will go to project-driven experts. Yeah, and this is happening now and had been accelerated with the pandemic. And your model, I think, is the one I used for 19 years. I always had experts in my companies and fixed people, a mix, which is the best, really. And I'm really happy to start now the Q&A session because everybody should listen to you, not only HR people and CEOs. You can help everybody to understand the new ways of working and what is happening right now on a global level. Who wants to start? Maybe Thomas. No, I think for Thomas Portune, this was very interesting, wasn't it?
Thanks, Sylvia. Yes, with pleasure. I can start. Maybe Pedro, you touched a little bit.
Present yourself, Thomas. I think you can be a very good fit with Pedro. Sure.
Yeah, Pedro. So I'm CEO of a medical device company. We are producing products for GlaxoAstraZeneca. And we have here a factory in Spain with about 250 people. So really great, Pedro, what you presented to us. Liked it very much. A lot of insight for me. One concept that you touched a little bit, but I'm really interested in is the liquid company structure, which for me is something really out of what I imagine for myself and what I'm using today. So do you have some concrete, let us say, examples or application of where this liquid company structure is working and some really case studies where you say, guys, that's where you apply it?
Yeah, I'm actually obsessed with organizations, not even companies, that are able to generate value even without financial transactions, so without financial compensation. If you look at the software world, you will see that there are Unix fans and Mozilla fans everywhere. And they just contribute software because they love the product and they love the purpose. And this word is very important. So they're kind of soldiers for a purpose that are fighting together and organizing because they want to defend something they believe in and they want to make it a reality. So if you have a strong purpose, strong enough for people to fall in love with it and spend some time helping you change the world some way, this is when you start building this kind of vector of attraction to people that don't have a full-time contract with you and they're not expecting the salary every month, their check every month. So you can see by people who there's a new release of Star Wars and they go with their t-shirt and they start promoting the film like crazy. So this is a financial organization. And they're revenue driven and profit driven, but they have this huge community of people that would be willing to take part in the movie or in the promotion of the movie or in the setup of events to promote it for free, just because they are crazy about the culture that it instigates, the value they get from being part of a community. So it's really about turning the table and seeing, how am I contributing value to everybody in my community? How am I'm transmitting a purpose that goes beyond profit. For me, this is where it really connects with stakeholder capitalism. It's not about only sustainability. It's about, really opening your mind to all the stakeholders of your business, around your business, which is the users, the providers, the citizens, the the viewers, the everything, the health system, doctors in your case, patients, family members, and how you can generate value for them all. And this is when you're going to start seeing magic happen. In the case of medical devices, you're always a transaction between doctors and patients, doctors and hospitals, insurance companies and hospitals and doctors, family members and patients. And there are many ways in which you could rethink how, the business model as a whole, because business model usually is thought about in the financial perspective, but a business model and the journeys, the journeys of the different stakeholders and how they're getting value from interacting with you.
Mm.
And this is where liquid company starts happening,
Interesting.
And liquid companies are like small universes. So a pyramid-shaped organization is usually supervised by the people at the top. But universes like liquid companies are supervised by the members. So if you log into Airbnb or Uber, which are really financial driven companies, but the behavior of drivers and users is managed by drivers and users, by reviews, by reputation. So, you're trying to build ecosystems where value is protected, where it's very clear what's adding value and what's destroying value. And you're trying to get more people and more interactions of the type that are generating value and getting rid of behaviors and people that are destroying value.
Great, Pedro. That's inspiring, and it's interesting how to connect that to somehow corporate world somehow, because HR we use for innovations, we use pyramid for efficiency afterwards when the product getting mature in some of the cases, but inspiring ideas around that.
In your case, also, it's really important because the health sector is very regulated, and the flow of data from patients to pharma companies or health companies and governments and hospitals is really restricted. It's actually, for me, it's really surprising because it's one of the less customer-centric sectors in the world, when there's the most interest in the world to be the owner of your own data. But I'm sure that everyone here is the owner of your own emails, but you don't own the results of your clinical tests in the last 20 years, which is really interesting, right? So there are very smart opportunities to really redefine these journeys and these ecosystems. For example, we're doing a lot of work with associations of patients and pharma companies and building small ecosystems or learning platforms or repositories of information where you can exchange information for data or get people involved in tests or in exercises or in innovation workshops to define the new products, new channels, new ideas.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pedro.
Who else has a question? Maybe from people and culture positions. I see several ones here. Any question? What would you advise them, Pedro? People from people and culture, how can they impact in getting more liquid mindset in the companies?
Well, I think that there are many things that are necessary, and it's necessary to be smart. For example, I mentioned, leading with purpose. Every company has had a mission and a vision, but we've been, biased because our shareholders were the most important. So it's really fun to look at the mission statements of companies that were only managed by shareholders or shareholder interests. And by baby boomers looking for efficiency that I mentioned at the beginning of the call. But if you look at, I would say maybe a standard mission statement from an old company, from an auto company in the 80s, it would say something like, we are an organization that tries to drive value to the stakeholder through the total quality and the excellent performance of our operations, and something really, really boring, like 100 words long and full of corporate bullshit words that you don't feel connected with. what you see right now is a very visible purpose that really connects with you, even if you're not an employee. And you have to fall in love with the company before you become an employee. Like people go and work at SpaceX because they're in love with the mission. And I would say that you tend to see founders and leaders that are exaggerated on their vision. Like, I want to get to Mars in 2024. Elon Musk 10 years ago, never gonna make it, but it's really inspiring. It really stands out. Like, look at the mission statement from Boeing, and it's probably going to be very, very boring. So I'd rather work in a company that's trying to bring humanity to Mars, not to somebody who's going to drive value through the operational excellence, you know? So there's a very cool sentence by Jeff Bezos that says that we are very exaggerated on our mission, but we're flexible on the implementation. Like, let me be exaggerated and we'll sort it out, and we'll probably not reach the moon, but we'll do something exciting.
Thank you, Pedro. You're just mentioning our slogan is moonshot thinking for HR. And you are mentioning Kennedy's famous speech. Thank you for being here. It's 4 o'clock. We are very on time. Thank you, Pedro. Really, you are so inspiring. I could listen 1 hour again, another hour. Thank you, really. I will put you in contact with some people who participate today. I think would be a great fit for you both. Thank you for being there, and have a good afternoon, everybody. See you in the next session.
Ping me on LinkedIn. We're always looking to engage with everybody.
Yeah, okay. Completely right.
And thank you so much for the opportunity, Silvia.
So much. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro.
Happy afternoon to everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.